So hello and welcome back to the Exist Better YouTube channel. So before we get started, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. You can sign up for my newsletter. If you like this content about the collective shadow or how to integrate your personal shadow, that's generally the framework through which we view everything on this channel. So I have been observing something my whole life that I didn't have a name for. And I kind of just thought it was, in my head, the whole gaslighting thing that we talk about in the Have You Been Talked Out of Trusting Your Intuition video. So I was in that mode for a while, just assuming that I was insane and imagining everything. But I now know, especially based on the last couple years, just like public, media, the public narrative have really brought this to my awareness even more so. And on top of that, I've heard a lot of other people calling this out, so I now know for certain that it is a real thing, it's a real problem, and it might actually be impacting your personal life. So what is this thing I'm talking about? What I'm going to call it is the cult of logic. The cult of logic. So what do I mean by this? So if you follow spiritual content, you may have heard a lot of people say that we live in a time of extreme imbalance toward the masculine and away from the feminine. So that is partially what I'm going to be talking about here, but I'm going to get a little more specific. When spiritual teachers and whoever says we are leaning too heavy to the masculine, what they're basically talking about when we bring this down to a day-to-day life level, we're talking about a culture or a society that values productivity, assertiveness, logic, linear thinking, left brain thinking, that kind of stuff. So we can say that is 50% of reality. Now the other 50% has been relegated to the back burner at best, and that is the feminine side of life. So that is emotion, that is everything that's subconscious as opposed to conscious, because the masculine is conscious. So the feminine is the unconscious, the emotion, the intuition, creative thinking, right-brained thinking, being changeable, so not being really direct. It's more indirect. This is actually something men complain about a lot in women. All of these things can manifest in a good or a bad way. Why am I calling mainstream society a cult? That's a pretty extreme thing to say. So I'm going to give you some examples. When you say intuition to most people, they will not know what you're talking about. They will not know that that exists. They will not know that that's a thing. And in the worst case scenario, they will often ridicule you for claiming that that is a real thing. Basically, in mainstream culture, it'll just be presented as this kooky, weird, mysterious, unknown thing that we haven't proven yet, right? So this is part of the cult mentality. In reality, many of us know, if you're watching this, you probably know that intuition is a real thing. You may experience it every day. You may have had intuitive experiences that are even really far out and really incorporating clairvoyance or something like that. And so you know that this thing is real and you experience it all the time. But there is still this strange unwillingness to incorporate it into society and learn about it. Now, when we take the emotional spectrum, this is something I talk about on social media sometimes, and honestly, some people get really, really upset and, will send me an angry message when I say it. But basically, what we believe about mental illness in this culture, especially in Western culture, is largely a misunderstanding. So people with mental illnesses are not necessarily ill at all. when people operate within the realm of emotion, the problem is that that is such an ignored realm of reality, right? Remember, I was saying we only deal with the masculine, we only deal with the conscious, the logical. We do not deal with the emotion. We consider it either fake, nonsense, it's a problem. It's that's the kind of like the consensus, is that emotions are problems that we're having. So if someone in the Western world goes into a therapy session, the problem is a lot of times the therapist will be trained in this masculine world. And I don't really mean that men benefit and women don't. That can be one way it plays out. That's very common, but that's not really what I'm saying. When someone goes in and says, I'm having depression, a therapist who is trained in this Western model, especially a psychiatrist, someone who is trained in the medical model, they will think that this is a problem to solve, right? That's how logic works. Things are problems to be solved. Now, a person who's experiencing anxiety or depression, they're not actually having they are having problems, but the problem that needs to be solved is not the anxiety or the depression. The emotional system is delivering messages to you about what your problems are. Because mainstream society is this cult of logic where the blinders are on to everything besides logic, we can only see through the realm of logic and everything else is nonsense and superstition. We can't solve these problems because emotional problems can only be solved in the emotional realm. They cannot be solved in the logical realm. The same as I can't fix my car by chanting at it. I can't solve a logical problem through the emotional realm. Do you see what I'm saying? So if I want to get my car fixed, I need to go take a logical step to get it fixed. We're good with that. We get that. Everyone gets that. We take this model and we apply it to everything. And we apply it to this entire 50% yin feminine side of life. And it doesn't work. It was never meant to work. It's a completely separate system. So the reason I go so far as to call it a cult is that people are unwilling to learn that. And again, if you're watching this video, you're probably very open-minded. This probably doesn't apply to you. But many people are unwilling to learn that. They say, no, I'm staying in this 50% of reality and the other 50% isn't real. And the problem is that these people tend to be the ones who are passing laws, maybe they're even helping people in the mental health field. Maybe they're even working in that field. Usually doctors, a lot of times scientists will fall in this realm. Not always, of course. The good scientists know that both of these realms are important. The problem is we are trying to basically mandate, our society in the West especially is trying to mandate only this 50% logic realm existing, and the rest has to be nonsense. So this has a lot of implications. For women in general, so let's just talk about women for a second. Women run fundamentally on this other system, the emotion intuition system. And so that means that a woman's existence is consistently invalidated at every turn. You can actually see this in horror movies. I don't know why this is a thing, but my partner watches a lot of horror movies. Every single beginning of a horror movie is about a woman suspecting something is going on, and then her husband telling her that she's crazy. This is a perfect example of how women are gaslit simply by existing in this society. Women's bodies run on 30-day cycles. That is a yin thing. That is an energetic thing that has nothing to do with logic whatsoever. It is completely illogical in every way. It is not productive. It is not efficient. Well, it is efficient, but not in the way that society needs it to be. because society needs you to be a cog in the wheel. You need to just fit into a little spot and do your work. And this is something that Graham Hancock has drawn attention to when he talks about how we're discouraged from developing higher consciousness. That is another way of saying what I'm saying. So we're only allowed to do the concrete materialism things. And if we're doing anything else, we're either, at the very best, we're just considered kind of weird people who just didn't really fit in. At the very worst, sometimes this can turn into a very emotional and intuitive person just getting permanently stuck in the mental health system. Because everyone at every step in the process, their families, their friends, their therapists, doctors, everyone tells them they're insane or that they're broken. Okay, so, and they're doing this politely. Sometimes they even mean well. They're assuming that you're broken and unwell because you're operating fundamentally from this emotional, intuitive system, the feminine yin system. So you might wonder, well, why do people feel so terrible if this is such a great system? Because the system, because it has been ignored, this is important, because it has been pushed into the subconscious and ignored, and we have no idea about how to deal with any of it, or, there's a whole science to it, there's a whole system to it that most people have no idea about. They do not teach this in school. So when something is ignored and pushed that deeply into the subconscious, it tends to fall into disrepair because it's a mismanagement issue. So when someone says, I'm having an anxiety attack, I've talked about this on the blog, that term itself is a misinterpretation of the emotional system. It is what the cult of logic thinks about panic and anxiety and fear. So the cult of logic says, you're having an attack because your panic is attacking you. Your emotions are enemies of yours, and they are attacking you because they're nonsense. You see how insane this is? This is why I'm calling it a cult, because we've gotten to this point where it's time to get really vocal about what this is. It's extremely damaging. So they're saying your feelings are attacking you. Here, take this pill, or try this technique where you write down, you basically try to brainwash yourself in a positive way. So if you have a negative thought, you immediately put a positive one on top of it and just try to get rid of the negative one. That's one example. Like I said, medications something like Xanax will just make it so that you can't feel, and you feel, it totally relaxes your nervous system, so you just don't ever have to deal with your fear. And this whole time, your anxiety attacks, again, just using these as an example, are trying to tell you something you need to know. Nothing in the emotional realm is ever happening for no reason. It's never nonsense. It's never this hopeless thing that you have to take a pill for the rest of your life. And there are therapists, there are psychologists and psychiatrists out there who do believe that, and they push that ideology on their patients, often because they think it's good. They think they're doing something good, but they're not. They're actually teaching people who are emotional to believe that they are broken. We are teaching people to believe that the feminine system is a weakness, a brokenness, it's nonsense. And this is why modern day women's empowerment functions strictly in the realm of logic. And I have a whole article on this on the blog from a while back. Women's empowerment is all about making women more like men, making women more, making them CEOs. Like girl boss is like a term that's always thrown around now. Women can do everything men can do. Women are smart too. Women are super logical. Women are, what else? We're not all just emotional. We're like super, we're everything that a man is. And the reason the cult of logic wants you to think that is because they're afraid of you finding out that there's another 50% of existence. Because as soon as women find this out, it's fast. Their development is so fast because they're naturally this way. Women are consciously this way. So women are consciously emotional, consciously intuitive, conscious everything. So once a woman finds out what it really takes to develop her feminine power, it's curtains for the cult of logic. They don't know what to do. For men, this is going to be reintegrating what Carl Jung would call their anima. So for women, this is just going to be a conscious thing. It's going to be more about consciously accepting the things that you naturally are that you've been stuffing down. This is actually something that Emma Jung, Carl Jung's wife, talked about, how women have a very extreme bias against themselves and defer to men and masculine ways of being as correct automatically. So this is the imbalance. This is the skew. We're not seeing that the two ways of existing are actually both of equal and important value. So when people say, like, we want equality, we want women's rights, this is what they really want, but a lot of them don't even know it. They think it really is that men are just all oppressors, and it's really not that. It's that the system is imbalanced. For the men, this will be incorporating more of their feminine, and their feminine is subconscious. It's called the anima. So this is going to be harder for men because, what they are naturally is masculine, which is fine. That might need some healing stuff too for various reasons. We're not necessarily trained in this society by the cult of logic to be positive in the masculine. This is where the term toxic masculinity really comes from and has value. A lot of people just throw it around and they use it to just, talk about how terrible men are. Really, if we want to bring value to that concept, toxic masculinity is what the cult of logic operates in. So it's not healthy masculine, it's extreme masculine. It's pushing myself to work 80 hours until I collapse, and that's normal and that's good. That's the toxic masculine. It's I'm aggressive rather than assertive. It's I am domineering rather than strong. You see how one's positive, one's negative? So there's real masculine, which is also being suppressed in a lot of ways. So for men, it's going to be, bringing in more of that subconscious feminine that they don't really recognize in themselves. And that is the shadow work process. And I know a lot of men are getting into that process. And that's a really good thing for everybody. For men to be getting into shadow work is a good thing for society. It is so discouraged for men to be doing this work. For women, it's being proud of what you actually consciously are. So yes, there's going to be shadow work, but it's not necessarily going to be shadow work like, oh my gosh, what are my emotions? Like, what even is this intuition thing? Like for men, it might be a little more like mysterious like that. For some women, it's going to be like, you're just going to launch into the pain of the fact that this is why so many feminists are just super angry, and everyone's always complaining that feminists are too angry. Because as soon as you do any sort of awareness work, you're going to move right into the anger that everything you are has been suppressed, and you've been told it's wrong, and you've been, turned around and made to think that you're supposed to operate like a man. This system is pushing women's nature out of the picture because it's so powerful. whether you're male or female, it doesn't matter what you identify as. It's that once you bring this feminine energy into your daily life, you are so powerful, everyone else is literally intimidated. And for the cult of logic, that literally means the end of them. That means the end of that reign of ignorance, divide and conquer, brute force, fighting to get everything done. That caveman, toxic masculine reign that a couple people are still holding out for. Like there's like a handful of people who are like, let's keep doing that. And like everyone else, the majority is like, no, let's not. And so that's why these sort of cult-like messages, and it seems like the media is sort of like engineered to have you in a very specific line of thinking. That's happening because the desperation is growing. As people get really into yoga, meditation, therapy that actually works instead of just pushes you to get back on your feet as soon as possible. As we get into learning how the feminine operates, once we incorporate that whole world of knowledge back into society, back into reality, and merge it with the masculine stuff that we have, like technology, like, you know, like the capabilities of the economy and technology, and fuse those things together, and you have this society where people will not be controlled ever again, where freedom is literally embodied. It's not just a concept, like an American concept. It's embodied. Freedom is life. Freedom is day-to-day life. And I manage me because I know how. I don't need an authority figure. I don't need some old man telling me how to live, how to think, how to feel, what to believe in. I don't need science as my God. I don't need technology as my God. That's what this is about. That's the cult of logic. Science and technology are my gods. There is no feminine. There is no intuition. There is no soul. There's nothing but materialism. And you should just listen to us because, you know, without us, you're like nothing. That's the narrative of the cult. I'm calling it a cult regardless of what it is. Maybe it's just some ignorant people who are not very emotionally advanced. Who knows? The point I'm trying to make here is that it's extreme. It's extremism. And the mainstream is extremism. And people who go off on these alternative paths are actually moving back into balance. So you going into your alternative spiritual hippie path is you moving back into balance. You swinging from all there is work and productivity and I have to just be the best and go, go, go. Swinging back toward the feminine, stopping in the middle, because we don't want to go just into the feminine and not have any masculine. That would be also a disaster. So we swing back to the middle, and people call you a hippie. They think that this cult is all there is, this mindset of like literal self-abuse. People think that that's all there is. This world where there's no such thing as nurturing. Even in women birthing in hospitals, it has to be like, you know, frantic, and there's all these medicines involved. There's all these questionable things going on. And it's stressful and it's terrifying and it's chaotic. That's not what femininity is. That's what the mainstream made it into. You know, women going to their male doctors to hear about what they need to be doing. That's insane. Okay, and this is going to offend so many people, but That's not to say that a male doctor can't help or provide support or provide knowledge. That can totally happen. But what we have is a system where femininity is completely excluded. So literally, when people say like a mother's intuition, when a mother always knows best, that's being exterminated, or people are attempting to exterminate that, either knowingly or unknowingly. If we did have balance, we would have these emotional, intuitive, nurturing, communal, all these feminine forces creating sort of like a framework for how society can be. And that would almost be like the guiding force. And then the masculine side of energy, or the masculine side of people, whatever you want to call it, would come in and create it. It would build it, literally. That's what the masculine does. It makes things happen. With the cult, the mainstream mentality, we're not doing that. We're saying the feminine isn't real. The framework we're creating is not even masculine. It's toxic masculine. It's gone rogue. It's like this cancer that's generating, like, we just have to create more. We have to earn more. We have to create more logical systems and frameworks and fill more of our time with more technology and more productivity. And it's insanity. It's moving it's taking society off of a cliff. And for those of us who are more sensitive, we've felt this burnout our whole life. That's the gist of that. I know this is like a super long video, but there was a lot that needed to be said about this so that you could really grasp what this imbalance is and how you fit into it. Everyone's going to fit into it a little bit differently based on their personal characteristics, how they like to be. So if you like this video, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, sign up for the newsletter, check out the Shadow Workbook if you want to learn more about what that process looks like in detail, and I will see you in the next video.